Welcome to another episode of Clinic Success Secrets, the podcast where we uncover the strategies and insights that drive clinic growth and elevate patient care. I'm your host, Tomás O'Dwyer, founder of Clinic Success Partners, a medical digital marketing and automations agency dedicated to helping clinics serve more patients and achieve the success that they deserve. In today's episode, it is my great honor, and I'm no doubt I'm going to enjoy this conversation, to be thrilled by Leah Braddell, a dynamic entrepreneur and CEO and CTO of DataBiologics, a company revolutionizing regenerative medicine with AI-driven solutions and real-world analytics. Leah's journey spans over 2 decades of leadership in healthcare technology, from pioneering biomedical engineering, a great foundation, dare I say it, to shaping the future of regenerative treatments through transparency and evidence-based solutions. Leah's insights bridge the gap between cutting-edge healthcare technology and real-world application, making her a sought-after international thought leader in both business and clinical settings. That being said, Leah, it's an absolute pleasure to chat again, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Me too. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So, for anyone listening, Leah has an incredibly diverse background, to put it very lightly. And before we get stuck into what you're doing today, would you mind sharing with the listeners a bit about what that background looks like? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I think it just starts from I'm just an intensely curious person, and most of my curiosity, my child, is around biology, and especially the human body, and mostly like when things start to break down, why? To me, it was just like, well, why would it change? What drives that change? And can we reverse that change? I had a lot of early experiences as a younger, like age, 9, in those preteen years, where people close to me and close to people who were in my family or close friends passed away from cancer. And that was really the first sort of trigger moment in my life that led me down the path of, I got to do something in medicine. Medicine is calling to me. And that really made me think, well, I want to be a surgeon. I want to be the one that can hear this and take this out and be like right there. But as I kind of grew and evolved, I realized my passion was really in technology and in the sciences. And that's really where I ended up in engineering, and we're specifically in the biomedical space and looking at ways to manipulate chemistry and make that merge with biology and influence the biology. So I just kind of had that as a general theme from a very young age until now. It's been going on. It hasn't stopped. But part of what that also comes with, that kind of curiosity and that just interest in learning, I think is the other main theme in my life. Is if I'm not learning something new, I might as well be dead. That's just like, for me, learning is everything. And so I've moved from focusing on maybe getting titles and degrees and jobs and promotions and things like that, to have it being less about titles and how to label myself, more about the learning and the application of that learning. So to me, it's learn fast, apply hard, fail faster, just so you can figure out where to go. So that's sort of how I operate, and I really because of that, I draw to me people who are experts in their space. I love to learn from anybody who will teach me, and that's really how I got to where I am now with DataBiologics. The first thing that I did, like you're doing with your podcast, I knew nothing about this field as it stands today, 3 years ago. And it was really the founders of the company who were physicians, who were pioneers on the cutting edge of offering these new types of treatments to patients, who said, there's something here and we want to bring this, we want to bring this to the masses, and we want to help other physicians learn the techniques and technologies. And I said, okay, well, first help me learn. And so we did a podcast, and it was all about, teaching me the history. So it was called the Regenerative saga. So let's go back on the story. Where did this begin? What are these different techniques? What's the controversy? Who are the characters? And that has now evolved to something totally unique in the space that is able to touch and patients now starting to be all over the world. But it started from just a curiosity and a willingness to learn something new at every step of my career. I like to say I've never done anything for more than about 3 years intensely. Except for being a kickboxing instructor. That was my long time. I know we connected on that before. But yeah, that's sort of how I operate. So learning and challenging myself to try different things.
I think as we've said in our previous conversation, I think there's a lot of interesting parallels, both, background in biomedical engineering graduates, kickboxing, and being aggressively, passionately curious about just about everything. I think that out of shot here, I'm not going to do a head count. I've probably got 30 something books within about 1.5 meters radius of me easily. So across just about every topic. But before we talk about your learning philosophy and I'd like to touch on the topic of skill stacking, because you have a very interesting blend of character traits, but also skill sets that have allowed you to take the trajectory and make the impact that you have. But before we get into that, DataBiologics, what is it for anyone listening, or what do you guys actually do?
Yeah. So it's a kind of a gray zone of medicine today, in that the treatments that are primarily being adopted in regenerative medicine are things like platelet-rich plasma or stem cells derived from bone marrow or adipose, and even other new technologies like shockwave therapy and laser therapy and electromagnetic therapies. There's a lot of emerging options for patients. Some work really well, and some are totally snake oil. And in this space on the frontier, there's minimal regulation, or at least enough that says patients can pay for this, but we don't really know if it works, and we're not going to reimburse it as insurance or as a government. So there's a lack of information on how these treatments are, how effective are they, but also what's the best way to apply them. And when you don't have that kind of consensus and that guidance for both patients and doctors, things that might be a good alternative don't get attention that they need, and they don't grow, and they don't expand, and then they don't create a path for that consensus. And what's uniquely different about this kind of technology is there really isn't a big pharmaceutical player that stands to benefit from the success of something like platelet-rich plasma. It's taking your blood. It's all you need is a license to inject and a centrifuge with a specialized kit that helps you concentrate the blood and then bring that back to the patient. We're using platelet-rich plasma for everything from joint dysfunction, knee osteoarthritis, to hair restoration, aesthetics, sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, all of these different conditions, with the fundamental theory that, well, if we can harness the body's ability to heal, and in your blood is all the chemistry needed to do that, maybe we can influence that, and it can be truly like personalized from the patient's own, cells. But when you don't have something to patent your blood or my blood, it's yours, then there's just not the incentive. And our system today, our regulatory system, really requires a substantial incentive to push anything through the FDA, anything through to insurance companies to get them to pay for it. It's millions and millions of dollars. There's so many layers and so many requirements that if, something like this where the cat's already out of the bag and nobody can really stand to be the winner at the end of that race, then it's really left to the doctors. And so you have that side of the equation of or lack of really support for the validation needed. So the studies and the paying for the trials and figuring out how to get everything's all the paperwork that's needed. Then you have the other side of it where you have doctors who they see the treatment gap with their patients. They see that there is a demand for alternatives. I think we all see it now. Look at what's happening just in the political climate and in, the chat rooms and what people are doing. They're rejecting traditional medicine. They're rejecting traditional payment models. They're looking for alternatives. And when you have a void of information, you end up with a lot of potential bad actors in the space. And without anybody really coming to the front of the line and saying, hold on, we're going to look at this really through an unbiased lens, and we're going to look at the evidence, and we're going to present that to the doctors, present that to the patients, so that they can make an informed decision. And when you can narrow things down in that way, then the cost to try to pursue the higher level validation and the regulatory, it goes way down. And I'm already working with a couple of companies now, and we think that we can really pursue some, controlled regulatory grade trials at a much lower cost than what anybody else is doing in the pharmaceutical industry today. And so all that said, the doctors have a similar sentiment. So it's not just patients who are rejecting all the traditional things and the payment models in healthcare. Doctors are also completely fed up with it. And they're looking for other ways to bring cash into their practice so that they can be sustainable. And not just because of greed. I think people misconstrue that. Yes, there's potential for that anytime you have, limited regulation and sort of choose your own adventure. But ultimately what I find, and I talk to hundreds, maybe thousands of doctors over my career at this point, most of them just want the ability to have that creative freedom as a practitioner. That is why they're licensed to practice medicine. And that's ultimately what our entire system runs around is the highest level license. They get the final say in what is that best option for patients. And the more you layer in the insurance and the practice control and all the administrative burden that's put on physicians today, the more you take away that ability to practice kind of creatively and create personal solutions for patients. The doctors are looking for alternatives too, and the market's going to continue to put pressure on them. They're getting less and less reimbursement. So today, if you're a joint replacement surgeon, I think people don't recognize that the surgeon equation, they get such a small piece of what the actual cost, what a payer might spend or what a patient might spend for a treatment like that. The doctor's part of it is just a small piece. It's everybody else, the facilities, it's the anesthesia, it's the suppliers. They're all the ones that are really getting the bulk of that. So for a doctor, the option to offer something to patients who maybe don't want to have surgery yet, or they're tired of just coming in every 3 months for a cortisone shot, which by the way, actually just accelerates degeneration the more you do that. So this is really something that what we're doing is providing an unbiased, simple way to do research in the real world. And it's really hard to do research in a private practice environment because there's no money for it. There's no research coordinators, there's no analysts and data scientists, and all the people that go into the academic space and into the pharmaceutical space. So we're trying to create all of that and make it affordable and easy to do in private practice. So our platform allows doctors to enroll patients, and we've tailored the platform to be scalable with everything that's in the frontier of medicine today. So we can track nuanced details about platelet-rich plasma, about all these different stem cell type therapies, energy therapies, you name it. We're able to not just say this happened, but what was the dosage applied? And so we're capturing a lot of very clinical granularity on the treatments being delivered. But the beauty of it is that the patient is also supplying us information directly. So our system automates outreach to patients who receive these treatments out to 5 years. And we're using clinically validated surveys. And so with that kind of measure, we have a standard that we can look to in the clinical literature and really assess, are people getting the improvement in function or the reduction of pain, or how is it impacting their mental health? Are they really satisfied with treatment? Would they do it again? Would they recommend it to friends? I think that when you look at the broader picture of medical rating, you might see the Top Doc magazine or the Castle Connollys, or those, they're pay to play ratings. Those are things that if you're a physician in an organization or even an independent physician, you can pay to be in those ratings and be elevated in that way. What we're doing is requiring that you have good data, that you have quality outcomes that are independently reviewed by us, and that you are committed to tracking evidence. And we're hearing directly from verified patients. And so that's a little bit more like consumer reports for healthcare. Like that's what we're trying to create is a path for both patients and doctors to really evaluate, especially these new emerging things. And in medicine, and you're probably aware of this as a BME, most of the time things happen first in private practice with innovative type mindsets. And then it expands to their small kind of tribe. Like, well, this worked for me. I've worked with a couple of patients, so maybe it will work for you. And then it turns into, well, let's have a little weekend meeting and do a training all together. And then it turns into, let's form a little society to promote what we're doing. And then eventually it starts to be adopted into mainstream academics and into residency programs and into the big American Medical Association type of organizations. But it starts first in a very tribal way, and they need evidence. And what we're providing is a really easy way to do that and collaborate, even if you're not related or connected to each other under a payer umbrella or under a health system umbrella. So that's a long story short. We're just trying to provide a lot more transparency to both the doctors and the patients, what works, what doesn't. And our platform is super scalable so that we can add new things as soon as they come up. Almost every week we add something new. We just added hyperbaric oxygen and homeopathic injections, and we're going to continue to add traditional things too, like we have cortisone and hyaluronic acid. Be adding all kinds of surgical treatments as well, so that people can really do a head-to-head comparison within the same framework that we offer on our platform.
Nice. There's so much to unpack there, and I'm sure we will. With regards to, I suppose, the difference, and again, you've obviously touched on this, the difference between there and the traditional healthcare data sources. In a very concise fashion, what is the key distinguishing factor between DataBiologics and these traditional healthcare data sources? Why hasn't this been done before? What really sets DataBiologics apart on that front?
Yeah, typically when you think about a registry, so a registry is kind of anybody who has had certain treatment, we're going to collect that. A lot of times these things are framed through a very narrow lens. So we're going to track this one kind of patient with this one kind of treatment. And it's usually going to be sponsored underneath the industry, medical device industry or a pharmaceutical company. So they have their angle that they're looking for, and nothing else matters. They're excluding everything else. You have the registry side of it, and then that usually still, again, gets sort of like consolidated and cohort or isolated into silos where only a few people get access to that and only a few people can produce insights out of it. And where it's done, not funded by industry, it's in the nonprofit sector where it almost never gets traction because they never have the right kind of motivation or funding to make something that can be universally adopted in the private practice. So that's kind of on the registry side of it. But on the traditional research side of it, it's almost the same thing in that studies are usually designed with a very narrowly framed focus around a patient and a treatment. And they don't want to have a lot of variability in the data. So this is where we end up with the problem of treatments we thought worked for this, but turns out it causes negative effects in 70% of people. Now, Sudafed's not on the market anymore. It's like, okay, well, because one paper that they got through to get the regulation is only was on this little small segment of patients. So we're taking the approach of put it all in, bring it all into the same framework and let the analytics. And now with the power of AI, we can be doing so much more on kind of the mining aspect of it and creating the controls that are usually thought about in the beginning to produce those insights. The other way that data is being sourced is just from things like healthcare claims and electronic health record systems. Another myth that all of this is like universally communicating with each other. The reality is EHR systems are designed for documentation, order management. It's just a repository. It's not structured and it's not meant for actually gaining these kinds of insights. So it takes a lot of money and effort to do so, but you lose that connection to the patient. Patients not usually responding with, how are they actually doing? It's all based on, well, this lab result, or they came in for this many visits, so we're making this. So we're just doing something very different in both the market that we're focused on, application that we built, and how we're embracing so much variability in what comes into our platform. It by intention. That's what we want. We want everything and then allow us to surface insights at it, because the more data you have, the higher power there is to do, like really pretty incredible analytics on it.
And I love touching the analytics and the AI side of things shortly, but in order to analyze data and to make predictions, because at the end of the day, all AI is just extremely advanced prediction based on data, we have to get said data. Now, I can imagine there's some challenges that you encounter when getting that. So what kind of challenges did you face in gathering and commercializing, this specialized patient outcome data, and, how you overcome the difficulty with getting said data?
Yeah, so there's two problems in healthcare when it comes to trying to get data. It's provider motivation and patient motivation. Nobody wants to enter data just for the sake of, entering data. They already are consumed with all kinds of applications. So the beauty of the space that we're focused in today is both the patients and the providers are already geared towards, this is an important thing that we need to do. So we're able to really foster and incubate this new way of bringing data to life and for a consumer like our patient in a space where we have pretty motivated users or pretty motivated engagement. So workflow is always the problem, right? Somebody has to log into an application, they got to enter a patient. So we're developing and have developed just a very simple user interface. And we also have ways that we can integrate and automate some of that enrollment. And then same thing for the patients. We don't require a login. There's no app to download. It's very simple, and our survey should take no more than a couple of minutes. And where it's done really well, the doctors are in that dialogue with the patient around how important it is for their own care, but also for the broader field that they participate. But we have a very good engagement for the type of platform that we have based on the nature of the market that we're in. But just because the market that we're in has that, that doesn't apply broadly to all of healthcare. But if we can make it simple enough and produce something of value to a patient and a doctor, then that motivates the engagement. All the effort today for a doctor to put data into their EHR system and for a patient to navigate their patient portal is not really resulting in anything of value to them. It's just purely viewed as an administrative burden, an administrative requirement. Somebody else is going to benefit from this, not me directly. So you have to kind of address the motivation factor and make sure you're delivering something that's useful to both of those audiences. And then the other thing that is a real barrier is the fact that most of my customer base today, we're on the provider side, they are not in academic institutions. They don't have research coordinators. They don't have people that are just paid for this specific purpose. I'll have doctors who do it all themselves because they're just running their own one-man show. So we had to factor in that there just isn't going to be that extra layer where you would have that in an academic environment or in a clinical research organization that funds millions of dollars towards those kinds of functions. So for us, it's much more about the focus on the value and what everybody is going to get out of that data rather than just the action of trying to capture and collect data, because you won't get very far if that's all you're, asking people to do.
And obviously, once that data has been gotten, there's the analysis component, which, needless to say, is sort of one of the areas, one of many, where you thrive. And uh, on the topic of data analysis, and what are some of the biggest challenges that you encounter when it comes to analyzing said data, and what role does AI play in terms of analyzing said data?
So the thing with analyzing data is, in our challenges, we've got lots of variability. It's not like we're working with just 10 or 15 different attributes. Even that, once you start to get to that number, the probabilities and all the different ways things can go becomes exponential. We've got hundreds of different attributes that we're tracking and that can be related to each other. And for somebody like me, I'm when I think about data, it's a little bit more like art to me. To me, raw data is just like a box of crayons. It means nothing without the artist, the person that's going to kind of put the colors together and figure out, what is this masterpiece going to look like? And for AI today, like large language models, they're trained on being able to communicate, kind of interpret written text. When it comes to creating analysis off of raw data, like clinical data, numbers and facts and figures, you have to train it. You have to train it with data that's already structured and already processed to a certain degree so it knows what to look for. So in AI today, none of the AI models know right out of the box, well, what is a good outcome in regenerative medicine? There is no real good frame of reference. It's all just kind of dispersed across the literature, and there's minimal literature to begin with and publication late. So what we're doing is creating a very highly attributed, standard structured database. That's the hardest part in all of this, is in terms of different things coming in. How do we create a framework that we can reproducibly train an AI model to be able to interpret? And I think we've all experienced working with AI, and you're like, what the heck did you just give me back? Like, it's a total hallucination, right?
Hallucinations, yeah.
How do you make sure that what it's producing isn't just I tend to train my AIs and say, you're just being lazy right now. Like, that is not the right answer. So we need to already have a sense for what is the right answer. So it's already sort of framed in that way. When our data processing and our algorithms, before it ever gets to the AI to give you a nice little conversation around it, we're doing thousands of transformations and optimizations on this data so that it has the right context applied. So if we're asking about a certain kind of treatment for a certain kind of patient group, and we want to understand the factors that affect the outcome, we'll have to define all of those in a database for an AI in order to make it the ability to conversate and produce the underlying data that's real, that's not totally made up based on the AI being lazy. I don't know if that's the right technical term, but that's how I view it. Yeah, everyone's like, you're being lazy about it, but it's totally not right. So, so I think it's an exciting time, because that's the assumption is that AI is just going to know everything, but we're already seeing and hearing that, well, AI has kind of trained itself on just about everything that humans have produced. Well, the problem is, especially with what I'm doing, this data doesn't exist anywhere. It does not exist in a database. You can't even buy it in claims data because there's no codes for many of these treatments. So what we have is a totally unique database, and that's really what that's what our moat is, our proprietary, platform, making this data, and then our proprietary algorithms that transform it into something an AI can actually interpret and do it with a high level of accuracy. That's the holy grail in anything to do with medicine. And we will build this model in our niche today. And that's what I love about it. Sort of allows me to incubate something very new and different. but that translates to all of medicine. Everything in medicine is, well, what's the patient's condition? What's the treatment? What's the technique and product that was used? What was the outcome? That's everything. Everything is related to that framework. And that's the framework that we're training our AI models to interpret and ultimately have, intelligent conversations around to make it easy to consume the kind of data that we collect.
I think you touched on what is probably one of the biggest misconceptions about AI and how it fundamentally works there, which is until we've touched with artificial general intelligence, at the end of the day, then you're the CTO here, so you can correct anything that I'm saying incorrectly. But as I mentioned, distilling it back to its rawest form, large language models, AI in general, it is fundamentally predicting data based on existing data sets. But in order to do so, it's like I don't know, back in the day when you're in college, and God forbid for anyone that's listening to this, if you knew me when I was studying biomedical engineering, keep your mouth shut. But hypothetically, if one was to copy someone's work, or something to that effect, you want to make sure that it's right in the first place. And at the end of the day, if the AI is trying to emulate what a correct answer should be, well, if that answer is not defined, that's where humans come in. When it's actually legitimately on the cutting edge, when it's actually creating that framework that the AI will then emulate. That is, and I think it's a genius point that you're making, that it is a very, very real moat. No one can copy you if it doesn't exist yet.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
they don't know what it should look like. With that being said,
just really smart babies. The large language model, it's like you can teach most humans. They're like getting a genius infant. Okay, so but they don't automatically know, if it doesn't exist in its database, and it's or in a database that it can kind of piece together this prediction, then it's just going to get to the next best thing, and that's with the hallucination. It's just like, well, this was something else that sort of aligns with what you're asking about. And if you don't know, if you don't have a way to go reference the source data, then you, first of all, as a company selling AI-based products and solutions, well, that's a big risk. You have to be able to validate what the source data that it made this decision on. And especially in medicine, where my intent is to then say, okay, great, then let's actually put this in publish the clinical literature. Let's build, a research paper around it. But if I can't get to the underlying data, then it's worthless, totally worthless in how we can validate it. So it's much more like training a very smart human who knows nothing about what you're doing. And that's where my entire team, how I reference my team, we're just humans in the loop. That's what our jobs are in the future, is just providing the right context from the human world into the digital world so that the interpretations can be made in the most accurate way possible.
And for anyone who's not familiar on the technical side of things, because a broad range of people listen to this, they'll know the medical side of things, but the actual tech side of things be a bit alien to them. One thing that there's a big buzz around, obviously, these days is AI agents and how they work. Does that differ, agentic AI? And for anyone listening, could you explain what an AI agent is?
So an AI agent is just really, it's just fundamentally, it's something that isn't just saying like, recommending that you take these steps. So you can go to AI and say, I want to write a simple program on this code base, give me a suggestion about that. And it'll say, okay, here you go. Here's this simple code base that you can use. But it's not going to actually go and deploy the code base. Or you might say, I need to follow up on these emails. You might drop your emails, or your AI that's already connected into your emails is saying, here's what we recommend, or what I recommend you write back to this email. But it's not going to actually go execute on sending the email or doing the outreach. So the agentic AIs are really they're just doing. They're taking some action that right now a human has to take. And that's really the future. That's where this is going. So it's first built on the language model is like the brain. It's how can you teach it? And now you need the programming, and that's the prompt engineering and ultimately the database reference and all the context that you put in the database that says, if you're asked to do this and this is the result, then go take this action. And these are your rules and your limits. Like you can do this, but you can't do that. And just like training anybody in a job, this is your job description. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do. This is the permissions you have. And so it's more and more we're going to see all of our applications have some ability for AI to do the things that we would ultimately have to take action on and do. And that's, to me, I mean, it's the biggest threat to the current job economy that we, especially in the technology space, but it's also the biggest opportunity for all of us in that we can really like clear some of the low level things that like bog down human creativity and human time for other things that are more in the real world and between people and about our health and about our wellness. AI has the potential to completely declutter what we're currently bogged down by, especially in technology. It's so overwhelming now. I personally can't wait for it to be able to do all of these things that I'm describing. But it starts with, training it in the right way with the right rules and the context that's needed. And then how do we use that to enhance everybody's lifestyle and productivity rather than like take away from the world in that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, one that I have conversation that I have several times a week, and I'll segue out of this after. But in terms of obviously careers, jobs, all that kind of thing, agentic AI, people are, it's going to replace entire departments and all that kind of thing. As you said, that there's certain things that AI just doesn't have at the end of the day. If what's interesting to me from a business model standpoint is like what sort of moats can individual businesses create, and one of the biggest things is having access to data. That to me is a big one that jumps out. Yeah, leaning in on that a bit more, what is the sort of impact that you see potentially that agentic AI will have on the tech space as a whole?
I mean, I think there's a real threat to, entry-level developers, QA developers, anything that is really just not necessarily so creative on like translating a human problem context into, all right, well, how does this actually need to translate into technology? But really it's like the maintenance and the checks and the replication, all of those things that today are what I would say are kind of in that entry level zone. That's all at risk. And we already see it. All the big tech companies are all laying everybody off right now because they know how to do this and they got all the money to build these kinds of agentic AIs to automate basic code quality and basic code for new application ideas. So I think that's something that, especially in the tech space, you have to be really considering. Like, how are you going to, what does that mean for the jobs that are available? And I think it's going to come down much more to how do you translate? How do you become a teacher? And how do you basically create yourself as an AI to, oversee the entry level place? So I think it has the potential to kind of accelerate everybody's, from being bogged down and reading code just for checking it for like spell checking it basically, to you're now can sit in a much more creative space and a more higher level view and allow that kind of work to be done in the background instead of taking 8-hour days just plugging away at that. Now, of course, I'm saying all this as a person who like just, cherishes creativity and being in that place. So I can't necessarily speak to it if that's the, if you just like to clock in and clock out, but I just don't know. I don't know any, especially in the developer tech space. I think it's inherently a creative.
Mhm.
I think the parallels between tech and like the, the arts, like the music industry and musicians and songwriters and people like that. I think that that's much more of the type of, um, brains and motivation that exist in tech than maybe people that don't know tech kind of view it as. They just look at, oh, okay, it's just, nerds who are introverted and don't come outside and just sit on their computers, and they must just like that kind of, because it's hard to fathom. Like, it seems so boring to people. Like, how can you feel like code and spreadsheets? But when you see those things as art and expressions of art, it's enjoyable. And so I relate to people mostly in that way when I meet other tech folks. And so this, I think, actually gives them a path to fully expressing the creative side that the current requirement for tech developers really just sort of bogs you down and hired in checking your code. But it's that's the trade-off.
Well, I think it's interesting as well, because if you think about the theory of constraints, effectively that's all it's doing. It's just removing the bottlenecks and constraints. Um, Two things that kind of came to mind to me there is, one, the way you're describing agentic AI is it's nearly like doing spring cleaning on, clearing out the cobwebs of systems. And this is just a metaphor I just thought of. It's nearly the way you're describing it is nearly that humans will become living, breathing APIs between the physical world and the digital world.
Yes.
That's basically what we're becoming.
Right.
We're we're the translators. So for
And
anyone
with that,
listening,
I do
yeah,
think there's going to be, the more that this evolves, the more, and I already see it now too, even though I'm part of this like tech community here, and we, meet every Saturday of the month, and it's purely just like people all getting together to talk about ideas. Like, we're not on our computers, we're not like, necessarily building something. But I think there's going to be more and more time that becomes available for real human to human interaction,
Mhm.
or that we can, pass certain kind of, mundane tasks into the AI hands. And then also, because AI is also the other side of it, I'm trying, on the rosy side right now, but the dark side is AIs consume our media and our social digital connection, where you don't really know what's real and what's not. And that's already
Yeah,
pretty close, and it's going to be even more. Like, a year from now, there won't be a way to really discern it. So you're going to be looking for the in-person real connections, real time with people, real conversations, in order to, you know, fuel your identity and your like
yeah,
purpose and all of that. So I think that that's going to open up a whole new opportunity for, we've all been living on devices and in the social world and elevating in social media influencers, and that's like the economy, but fundamentally the AIs can take over all of that. So
yeah,
that's not where we're going to get the next like evolution of humanity. Is not going to come there. It's going to come back into the real world, I think.
yeah. It's funny. I literally was having this conversation with somebody 5 days ago. I think the role of community online is a first step, but offline ultimately is what's going to happen. Because as you said, when you can't tell, it just becomes arbitrary all of a sudden. If somebody has 1 million subscribers or followers on YouTube, it's like, well, I don't know if you're real. And humans, I was reading a book.
Them are real, but
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I remember I was watching, reading a book, same as ever. It was called? It was by the guy who wrote Psychology of Money. Look, his name will come to me, but the idea basically being is, what will never change, and it's like, well, the human psyche doesn't. We are tribal creatures, and we are emotional beings, and that doesn't change no matter what. Yeah. So I think when you boil it all down, what are people always going to crave? Well, we're going to have fear, we're going to have love, we're going to crave connection with others, and in an age where we don't know if we can find that online, we'll be metaphorically leaving our caves we'll be squinting in the sunlight literally and stumbling around and reintegrating with people, which I think definitely, as you said, has its own. It's that a Ready Player One kind of vibes, but I like to think that
Yeah.
people will be sick of that.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. I mean, just like the record traveling and people are out. I mean, you think it's, well, you have that side of it, but then you have like Surgeon General saying there's a loneliness epidemic in the country and in the world, and there's, falling birth rates and all these different things. And those things aren't going to be solved by AIs. There it's going to be solved by creating actual community connection, like real people connections that can be maintained and maybe, fostered online and through your agentic AIs to kind of keep pace and make sure, like, okay, oh, there's this thing I should be part of. But otherwise, it's going to be people are craving the real, being real connections, talking with real people. What is the other point? What are we doing here? If we're not being in our biology in this physical world, because the digital world is just going to keep evolving faster and faster. So we have to
Anchor
make sure
ourselves.
that we have those connections outside of it.
It's how many biomedical engineers does it take to solve world loneliness? No, I think, and then just with the idea of, I mean, this is getting very abstract and esoteric. We'll bring it back to the biology things, but it's kind of like, theory of constraints. Well, if the digital capacity of the world stops being a constraint for human development, well, then it boils down to, okay, this constraint again is physical connection. I think that's where the priority will be, and that's where the next batch of problems for people to solve as society will be. And that is exciting, to be fair, when you look at it through that lens. But for anyone that's listening that isn't a biomedical engineer originally and is a super techie, there's a lot of buzzwords that we're throwing around here. But with that being said, it does highlight just how broad your knowledge is across tech, biology, most things. With that being said, the transition between, I'm just interested in the biomedical engineering background. That's I'm biased because that's mine. What made you make that pivot out of biomedical engineering? In doing so, what were the skill sets or maybe mental frameworks that you took from that biomedical engineering background into what you did after?
Yeah, I think for me, like I said, I'm just like super intensely curious, and I'm learning. I'm just full immersion. I'm always just sort of like 100%, energy about something. Ended up really, I started college courses when I was 15, and by the time I was accepted into a PhD program, I was 20. And started, it just kind of kept going. And so my focus though was cellular, molecular, and tissue engineering and biomaterials. I was really interested in how can we harness this chemistry to, grow new organs and, cure diseases and reverse aging and the themes that are super present today. This is what I was like intensely focused on more than 20 years ago. But what I realized once I finished all my coursework in my PhD and I was almost finished with my dissertation work, and the funding and for the work I was doing left the university. And it was actually a blessing at the time because I was already starting to feel like, is this really the track I should be on? Am I supposed to be an academic? Am I supposed to be a professor? I also was very had this other side of me that was very outgoing, and I'm, teaching group fitness classes, and I love that part. I was president of the engineering society. I'm running all the social events. I'm doing, but mostly it was like ideas. I love talking about ideas. I loved going and trying to find people who would get excited and get motivated about ideas. And that actually lets, somebody to say, you'd be really good in medical device sales. You might like that. And oh, what is that? What does that mean? What is that life like? And when they described to me that I could be in the operating room, working with advanced technology, like convincing doctors why they should use things and earn a really good living doing it, thought, okay, that's what I should be doing. I understand so much about the technologies that are in play, and I'm a problem solver. And so, but what I realized very fast, or when I attempted to make that jump as a PhD student into a sales job, there's no internships, there's no degree you can get to be a salesperson. There's no really anything other than just going and showing you can do it. And in the med device world, the entry level jobs are they need you to have a certain level already in order to get into that. And some of the big companies will hire, and train people, but almost all of them require that you've shown some level of ability to sell. And in sales, in med device, what they were looking for in those kind of mid-tier entry-level type companies was you sold cell phones or printers. It's like, well, that's so boring. I don't want to do that. So I'm like, okay, well, how can this be? How can I know I can do this, but but I know looking back now, I've hired, trained, and recruited lots of salespeople, so I understand what was going through their mind when I was trying to interview for these kinds of jobs. But instead of going to selling cell phones and printers, I decided to do something, in my mind, bigger and more independent that would get me there faster. So I went and got my real estate license while I was still a PhD student and decided, well, that's the fastest path. I'll get my license, I'll start selling, and then I'll go back to them and do it. And so that's kind of what essentially happened. Right? I got my license, I started selling, I did the crash course, and I got my license in like 2 weeks. And then, but through that, I got the taste for what it's like to not just, earn commission checks, but what it takes to like build your business and build something from zero and go find clients, and then the contracting and like coming up with pricing, and like just all the things that now I do, and I have done so many times in my career with every kind of new territory or new job position I've taken. It's all the same basic skill set. It's kind of assessing what is the goal, what are the tools that I have available to me? Is there any like requirements that need to be in place? Yeah. So like I said, the labels, if it's required for me to have a license, okay, I'll go get it. But if it's only required for me to have the knowledge, I might just listen to a bunch of courses, take a bunch of courses, never take the test, and then just do it. And so that's kind of how I become a developer.
That's seen in it's like that scene in Good Will Hunting, and where he's like, oh, you spend 4 or 5 years on and hundreds of thousands of dollars on information that you could have picked up for like $5 in the library. So
it's basically right. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword, because now, while I did all of that work and I didn't actually complete my PhD, I have all the knowledge that anybody else who's gone through that kind of a program does, and some, because I've now applied it in so many different ways. But in certain, environments, having the credential is important. People care about that. You're judged by the credential on your name. And some people that's their only job for decades and decades, is just gathering more and more, degrees and credentials, and because that's the currency in certain like arenas. And while I see that as like, sure, that's a barrier, who knows? You don't know. Maybe I will go give this PhD. You never know what I'm going to do. I really don't put any I don't think too far out ahead in the future on those kinds of things. But to me, it's much more about like, just go and apply and find a way. And what was really great about taking the path of, selling devices, I got to sell so many different kinds of technologies. I started in neurosurgery, doing things for head trauma and brain surgery, and monitoring those systems. And then I was in more soft tissue, where I sold skin and nerve and tendon regeneration products, especially for burns, like big giant burns that would cover people's bodies. And it was just amazing that it could save their life and regenerate skin. So this is fantastic. Everything that I was very into. But really, most of my experience and my time in the industry was with a company called Intuitive Surgical that made the Da Vinci surgical system. It was the first robotic surgery system. And really, when we say robotics, yes, it was, there's robotic arms involved, but the surgeon was controlling those arms. So it was more of the first time a computer was in between a doctor and a patient in the operating room. And to me, that technology I got to experience from its early days and the very first specialty that adopted that, which was urology, all the way through multiple generations of that system, to see how, in the early years, it was, why would we use a robot? Like, it's expensive. It takes too long. It costs too much. Like, what is this? Like, there wasn't even EHR systems then when Earth selling these robots. It's millions of dollars. And to now, there's not a hospital in the world, or practically, that does not have one of these systems. And what Intuitive was so good at was really understanding the market opportunity. So I picked up a lot of skills in evaluating markets and how do you prioritize what you're going, how you can position yourself in these different specialty pillars. Because in medicine, everything's siloed into the specialties based on what these physicians learn. And then if you don't talk the right language, which is the only language they know, then you're immediately like, you're not one of us. You cannot be trying to tell us what to do. So you really have to be very aware of your audience and the type of clinician that you're selling to. But it's not just about the doctor, it's the whole team. It's everybody who touches the program, from the executive to the scrub tapping, sterile processing. It has to have a motivator in order to make something like that successful, to completely shift an entire way of doing surgery. It takes everybody. So I got to understand what it takes to change in medicine, and not just the obvious, like, well, this is really great technology. It obviously would be impactful here. Nobody ever disagreed with that. There always was like, well, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Where it broke down so fast was in the relationships between all the people and in the operational center, and the processes that are so baked in that you have to go and change. And you do it by driving belief around, what is this outcome that we're trying to get to? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your patient? What does it mean for the world? And it's almost a, evangelism more than it is just being a technical, showing a cool product with a feature. It's changing somebody's whole belief system and getting them to take a risk. So when you're a doctor and you're a surgeon, every patient on the table is potentially, their life is literally in your hands and everybody in that room, the anesthesia and the techs and everybody around that patient. And even if what they're doing to an observer, and I've been in thousands of procedures, this is also something I think I'm so grateful I went this path instead of medical school, because I got to see everything that I would never have seen had I picked a silo in medicine. But as an observer to these team dynamics and people trying and taking risks and doing new things, you start to see, kind of understand the different personas and different personality types and what each of them might need in order to, do the job that I needed them to do in progressing moving everything forward. So I just learned a lot about people and their motivation and how they, the balance of just knowledge, just technical, clinical knowledge, and then humanity underneath it, and your biases and your fears and your motivations. The merger of those things is what is medicine. And because it's a human-centered, that's what it is, taking care of humans. So inherently, we don't have any technology yet that has the full interface with our human biology. So it still takes humans. So I picked up a lot of those skills, and that was really in the field. And then working with a company like that was so on the front edge, and they still are. They're the main, there's nobody that competes with them. When you work in an environment like that, it was very focused, high intensity, high expectation of results. We were really looking at, the numbers. It was every quarter. So the culture was one that really drove towards excellence and high intensity and, we'll leave it all on the field kind of culture. So I got to really understand what it's like to be in a high performance organization, how that gets managed and run, and how do you motivate people on the other side of it to go into these environments where most of the time, the first time people met me, I'm the robot rep, they wanted to kick me out. I'm like, you're here to you're going to disrupt our lives. We don't want this. What are you doing here? I even had hospitals that had rules they put in place just for, my company and peace. And you're not allowed, you need to fax in the dot. Yeah. So I had to jump through extra hoops just to get to be in the building. And then, but once somebody made the right connection with, the surgeons and the staff, then it transitioned to something much more where I was just really part of the team and being I don't get to touch the patient or touch the technology, but I'm the coach in the room and just kind of assessing, you take a temperature constantly, which isn't easy to do and everybody's in masks and it's in the dark. You really kind of have to be aware of body language and what people are saying. And, so a lot of those soft skills were what I also really developed in these high stakes environments with people learning new things and being vulnerable and taking risks and coordinating complex personalities, right? Like doctors in general, the one of those businesses where the business runs around the doctor. They're the center of their world, and if you don't subscribe to that right away, you're going to run into trouble. So it's just it's a dynamic that you have to learn to adapt to and really be on your toes, on your game, and get to create that coach level relationship versus you're just you're disposable or you're unnecessarily in my way. Mostly the attitude that you get when you're first in it. So it just takes a resilience and it takes a way to separate what people might be saying and thinking about you initially, because a lot of times if people are throwing hate at you, you're not really going to want to go back there. I think a lot of people realize it's not a job for everybody, but if you can be like, all right, that's what's going to be right now. And I even got to a point in my career where I would tell doctors, I say, well, my job is just to facilitate your epiphany. That was all it was. It's not, you'll come to the conclusion on your own. I'm just giving you a recommendation on the steps to take to ultimately get there. And the more we would build and create relationships, at some point I say, hey, this is about the time this is about the time where you're going to look up out of this robot and you're going to be really annoyed with me because now it's like a challenge or a new challenge. Just like when you're working with a coach or a personal trainer and they're making you do something real extra hard, and I hate you right now. But then at some point it will split to, I don't think I could have done this without this technology. And this is really completely changing my life. And, so I wait for that moment because it's happened so many times to me in my career. And now I see it in this whole new space where I'm trying to provide a fast path for doctors to, assess new technology. What do we do? Is it working? Who should I believe? Those are the questions that I've faced for my entire career in the operating room, working with new tech. And now I'm applying that just in a new way and in a new space.
I'm conscious of the time. I want to make sure I get the chance. We perhaps fit this part in. Scaling the business itself, so DataBiologics. There's a lot of constraints that come in. We talk the tech side of things, of getting the data, analyzing the data, some of the biggest opportunities, what that looks like. Marketing the business. You obviously have had success in engaging many different healthcare audiences, including doctors, health systems, researchers, you name it. What marketing strategies have been most effective for reaching this sort of diverse range of groups?
Well, I think what you're getting at is I like that you frame it up that way, but the reality is we're still just an early stage startup and really haven't put much framework yet to how we market anything. We've been in that development of is this the right product? What is exactly this thing that this type of customer that we want to sell to that they need? And so it's been for us, and one of the things that drew me in to really join the original founders of the company was I know, and as everything I've just been describing, nothing in healthcare happens without physicians selling physicians. Doctors are the ones that influence each other, especially when you're taking a risk and you're changing practice and all those things. And so what was already built into the platform, so the development and the founders and our original, our early adopters, was a high level of credibility and a network influence and key influencers who are the presidents of the societies and speak in all the conferences. And so I have an automatic kind of level of credibility with our company brand in the current kind of niche space that we needed to be in to incubate what we're doing. So, we needed to do a lot of things when I first came on. Didn't really have a business model. We didn't have subscription offerings. We didn't have any of the analytics solutions. We weren't working yet with industry customers or doing studies and randomized studies. So a lot of that had to be, built out through finding the right early customers to, who are willing to somewhat take a risk on us and also work with us in that maybe something isn't yet built but we know we can do it, but we need to work with them and kind of iterating on it back and forth. So I think we've been doing that for the last couple of years. Now I'm really ready to say, here we have a distinct products. We have a distinct offering that matches for the private practice, that matches for the academic program, that matches for the medical device company. And now I'm able to start reproducing that and going over and over. So now I think we're ready to actually start doing more traditional, outreach and marketing and adding, a sales layer into our organization to start to foster and cultivate the relationships, especially for the more complex organizations. It just takes more time. Like I said, I'm selling into complex organizations, everybody from the executive to the sterile processing tech that had to be influenced to move in the right direction. And it's the same thing here. We have to get lots of buy-in. When the more, layers you add into a customer profile, the more buy-in you're going to have to get. So now we're going to lean on our early adopters, and you always have to have a strategy around customer success and influencers who can share why they work with you and what the value is that they get. And then from there, we can build our systems around that and set up our automation to reach a bigger and bigger audience. And there's other things that we need to do as well for scaling, for expansion into international markets. For example, we're collecting, sensitive data, protected health data, and every country has rules and requirements for how you collect that, how you store that, what contracts you need in place. So there's just general infrastructure, expenses and people that we have to plug in order to kind of continue our growth to the level that I know and believe that we can get. So to answer your question, we've been in the kind of product market fit, early customers, kind of business model validation for the last couple of years. And I'm just one that I don't think you should put money into marketing until you have something to
Mark.
and then there's the other side of it too, where if I really put a lot of attention in that lane, am I ready to take on a lot more customers? Because the worst thing that could happen is that I get, bad outcome or a bad, review, so to speak. And I don't want that. I'd rather wait to be ready for that level of customer than prematurely bring them in when I might not be able to actually support that business.
Yeah. But as I say, a great product makes marketing easier. Great marketing makes sales easier. So it sounds like, data biologics, the work that you're doing, it's badly needed. And I think the products will make everything else easier. And definitely, as I've said this to you before, I think my personal stance is the way, who am I? But the way I see healthcare going is personalized treatments for people. And I think the whole regenerative side of things is ultimately where things are heading. We are anti-fragile as people. We get stronger. We just need to be given the resources to use our own bodies to do what it should be doing. So I'm really excited. I love the fact that, we're kind of a lot of these treatments, PRP, stem cells, exosomes, all that fun stuff. Not to say there's a conception that it may be snake oil, may not be, because the data is not there, and you're doing very, very valuable work to bring that data to the front. So I just want to thank you for just bringing the data there and helping move healthcare forward.
Well, I think it's been, I just recently won a couple of different pitch competitions. I won the Arizona State Innovation Challenge, and then just this week won a competition with a visiting delegation from Dubai. And it's just super interesting to me in that, like, the message and the story that I'm sharing right now, that's getting people like oh, yes, of course, this is a needed thing, is not really different from when I was out with 2 years ago. It's just the timing and the understanding and the climate and of course, having some traction and more structure around the business helps a lot. But the fundamental message that I'm saying is that this is the Wild West, and somebody needs to put some evidence behind it. And there's actually things that are working, and nobody will know about this because of these, inherent biases. And so we're going to do it. I love an underdog story that I kind of a bit of a fighter on that. So
Shoe dog here.
Oh, so and it's been the people involved too that have kept me going, and now that I'm starting to see the world light up about it, it's even more like motivating. I think we're just gonna move faster and faster towards succeeding in this goal.
I'm excited to see what happens. Leah, where can people find out more about you and what you do and all that fun stuff?
So we have obviously our website, www.databiologics.com. We also do have a regulation crowdfund open that has really been geared for our customers and their patients, people who just want to be part of this and support. And so you can find out more about that at wefunder.com/databiologics. And then we're going to be exhibiting at a number of conferences this year. And so those would be like the next one coming up is the Interventional Orthobiologics Foundation here in Scottsdale at the end of May. So if anyone, you work with a lot of regenerative and med spa clients, that's a really great one to get, even if it's just like a first exposure to, well, how do you add these kind of treatments to your practice? We're going to be announcing our first DataBiologics high performers. Now we've created a ranking algorithm that allows us to benchmark providers and products and treatments and all these different things. So we're going to be showcasing that at this conference at the end of February here in Arizona.
Right, I'll add all those links in the show notes. But listen, Leah, it goes without saying, I really enjoyed this, and thanks so much for everything. And looking forward to doing it again.
Me too. Thanks, Ross.
Bye.